So, what am I going to do with you, Sergeant? I stood straight and didn't even think about replying. It was obviously a question that didn't need an answer. No one really wanted to listen to me in the first place. I was pretty sure some colonel I had never even met didn't want to listen. I really thought I was sent to him because all the other field grade officers in the division had worn themselves out yelling at me. The serious, bald colonel glanced up at the tall, skinny, white-haired sergeant major who was half standing and half leaning against the old, peeling office wall. "Hey, Sergeant Major, what do you think?" The sergeant major glanced at the papers he was holding. "All right, let's check this out. Article 118, big charges, 2 counts. Article 128, assault, a bunch of counts. Article 120, serious claims, 2 counts. Article 89, disrespect, several counts." He turned the paper over. The list just keeps getting better. It's really amazing. You can definitely say that you've made a lasting impact on your career after 3.5 years of service. The colonel shut his eyes for a moment. He was probably just wishing I'd dropped dead before he even opened his eyes again. I've been getting a ton of that lately. Do you feel any regret about this at all? That was a genuine question, but I had to keep it real. Yes, sir. No, sir. Major General Faulkner really wants all of this to just disappear. To be clear, he wants you to leave. So, he's asked me to be your guide for the rest of your time in the Army. You'll help me out, follow my instructions, and you won't step foot on main post again. You'll need to stick to the... He paused, glancing at the papers in front of him. You have 9 protective orders against you. There are a few more on the way, so let's just say they'll count too. You'll be leaving the Army when your ETS date comes up. The charges will disappear. Besides a pretty harsh general letter of reprimand, you'll dodge the fallout from what you did. Got it, Sergeant? It turned out way better than I thought it would. Absolutely, sir. The colonel suddenly grinned a small grin, but it felt really unexpected. Relax, Sergeant. I changed my spot and chilled out a bit. Just a little bit. I saw the sergeant major trying really hard not to burst out laughing. He simply had to ask. You put your husband and your company commander in the hospital with a fish? How on earth do you cause concussions, break arms, and fracture ribs with a fish? It was a frozen fish, Sergeant Major. I had just gotten back from the store when I spotted them. What about the charges for trying to forcefully use a foreign object? It's the same fish, Sergeant Major. It might have been a good thing the MPs showed up when they did. I just needed a few more minutes, Sergeant Major. The colonel was doing his best to hold back a laugh now. Did you know that your company commander is Senator Shirling's daughter? I knew, sir. She really made sure to tell everyone about it. But that wasn't what bothered me the most. What really got to me was that she was with my husband in our own bed. You brought this up to almost every officer in your chain of command, the chaplain, and a few MPs. Sometimes it got pretty intense. He turned the page. This is what makes up most of the protective orders. Hey, they kept telling me to be reasonable about this. But honestly, my response feels totally reasonable to me, considering what happened. Funny enough, the fact that she's the senator's daughter is actually helping you avoid a lot of trouble. Even though the senator would love to give you a hard time, he's busy with an election campaign, and his daughter's habits have already caused him some headaches. The sergeant major's playful grin grew even bigger. Keelhauling is really more of a Navy tradition. The colonel gave a wise nod. You bet. The official word on your husband and the good senator's daughter's injuries will be that they happened during hand-to-hand combat training. I worked hard to keep my cool. Rob is about to be my ex-husband. And that wasn't just her hand, sir. And you, Sergeant, are definitely not a proctologist. Just be thankful they haven't accused you of practicing medicine without a license. Absolutely, sir. You're dismissed, Sergeant. I really tried hard to stand up straight and give a good salute. This was basically the first chat I had with an officer in the last month that didn't include terms like confinement and dishonorable discharge. I began to turn and suddenly stopped. "Hey, sir? Where am I supposed to go?" From what I could see, there wasn't a unit around. The brigade driver had left me at an old hangar on a deserted runway, with an office that the colonel had clearly taken over for the meeting. It was in a far-off area of the training grounds, away from the main base. He took a quick look at the sergeant major. "I was curious when you'd bring that up. Well, here it is, your new office. Welcome to the 16th Training and Readiness Group. The sergeant major will show you around. She's ready for you, Pogo." I was amazed as he stood up and walked right by me. I glanced back at the sergeant major. "What am I doing here, Sergeant Major?" "Your job, Sergeant. You're a cargo handler, which means you load and unload planes. You'll be doing that along with some transportation management coordinator tasks." He stepped out of the office and into the main hangar, and I followed right behind him. "The computer and phone lines should be ready to go. The tech team is bringing a couple of computers by tomorrow to set them up in your office. The phone is already connected, and the contact list is on it. The crew will bring over the forklifts, pallets, dollies, and all that stuff on Friday morning." A horn blared outside the hangar. "That's all your stuff from your barracks room. I had your roommate pack it up for you. I got kicked out of my own house pretty quickly after the incident, and now I'm stuck in a temporary barracks room." He waved his hand toward the back of the hangar. "Your new place is right back there. It has a bedroom, a kitchenette, and a bathroom. Sometimes we need a lift on short notice in the middle of the night, so it's great to have you close by. Is this like being stuck in a lonely room? Do you have a problem with it?" His relaxed vibe vanished, and he suddenly became very serious. His friendly vibe suddenly felt like a cover for something way more dangerous, like a cold predator lurking underneath. A small, scared voice in my head told me that getting kicked out and locked up could be the least of my problems if I went against him. "No way, Sergeant Major." My roommate was a loud snorer. "I just want to know where I'm at." He chilled out a little. "You're not stuck here. Just stick to the rules Colonel Howard set, and you'll be all good. We're super busy, which is why we're getting this airfield up and running. You'll be working hard, probably doing 3 times the work of others in your field. But don't worry, you'll be treated right and get everything you need to do your job. You look out for the team, and we'll look out for you." The horn honked once more, and he gave a nod toward the hangar door. "You should totally let them in." I strolled over and flipped the switch to open the door. It let out a strange grinding sound, but slowly opened up to welcome a gray crew cab F-150 inside. When it ended, tons of testosterone and muscle came rushing out. So, there were 3 guys wearing khaki cargo pants, desert boots, and some funny bar t-shirts, but it was pretty much the same vibe. A big blonde dude with a short beard hopped out of the driver's seat, and an even bigger redhead with a full beard and massive muscles climbed out on the passenger side, while a slim dark-haired guy with a clean-shaven face stepped out of the back. The tall blonde guy gave a nod to the sergeant major and then glanced my way. "Okay, Sergeant, where do you want it?" I gestured to the back room. "I'm going to be living in there." The guy with the dark hair moved closer to me. He was really good-looking, tall and dark. "Hey there. I've a nickname." The sergeant major shot him a fierce look. "What part of NO don't you get?" He didn't raise his voice at all, but I could suddenly feel a cold, hard edge in his tone. The aptly named Hollywood got tense. "Understood, Sergeant Major." The blonde guy let out a big sigh and rolled his eyes. "Hey, grab the bags from the back seat. Come on." Hollywood flashed a bright smile, winked, and then turned back to the truck. The blonde guy strolled over. "Hey, I'm Kurt. You've already met Hollywood. And check out the big guy over there, that's Amos." The guy with the red hair mumbled something grumpy. Hollywood smiled brightly. "Don't pay any attention to old Amos here. He grew up in a swamp and talks more like an alligator than in English." Amos shook his head and effortlessly lifted a chair out of the back of the truck like it was nothing at all. I stared at them and suddenly it clicked. I bet I'm the newbie here, right? The sergeant major smiled widely like a playful jackal. You're the lowest ranking person in the unit, huh? Good catch. But hey, this hangar is all yours. You're the only one with Loadmaster certification, so what you say goes. He made sure the three guys were paying attention. All three looked at him and gave a quick nod. Despite the casual clothes, they were clearly super disciplined. They spent around 10 minutes unloading the truck and bringing everything into the back room. At some point during those 10 minutes, the sergeant major vanished. Kurt glanced at me right after they were done. How about lunch? Hey, what should I call you? You can just call me Kurt. When we're outside the compound, in the ready room, this hangar, and a few other spots, we stick to first names or nicknames for safety. That's also why we Sully wear civilian maintenance crew outfits out here. If you see the colonel in regular clothes, he goes by Howard, and the sergeant major is Pogo. Just keep in mind who they really are. You should grab some civilian clothes before we head out to eat. I had a hunch that making them wait wasn't the best move, so I quickly threw on some jeans and a t-shirt and dashed back to the truck. Amos and Hollywood were chilling in the back, saving the shotgun seat just for me. We had lunch at a local barbecue place, and I couldn't believe my eyes as Amos devoured what seemed like a whole hog on a bun while the rest of us enjoyed our regular meals. Once Kurt was done, he slid his plate aside and relaxed in his chair. You might be starting to see that this isn't Kansas anymore. Totally, that's what I think too. We hold exciting, last-minute training events for teams everywhere. I rubbed my forehead like crazy while all three of them looked at me. Sorry. I'm just trying to wipe the word stupid off my forehead. Amos let out a deep, hearty laugh, and Hollywood flashed a cheeky grin. Kurt shrugged but gave a little smile. All right, but you don't have to worry about the specifics. I understand. I might not have all the details, but I'm not clueless. Sergeant Major wants you to know the rules. Mission comes first. All the nice stuff stays outside. I sort of noticed that. No slacking on PT. You'll jump right into weapons training and qualification as soon as I can get a schedule ready. I just got qualified 2 months back. Absolutely. That won't fly here. Hollywood might teach you about rifles, but I'm the one who'll show you handguns and shotguns. You'll go through more ammo in a month here than you ever have before. Hey, I'm just a cargo handler. No big deal. The unit has its rules. So, we have 6 teams that work in a red, amber, and green rotation. At the moment, Team 1, which is mine, and Team 2 are on amber, so we're here to help you out. He saw Amos polish off the rest of his plate. Do you have a car? I used to. My husband took our car, and now I can't go get it because it's on main post. Is your name listed on the title? Our names are both on it. Do you have the keys? I dug around in my purse and passed them to him. He asked me to jot down the make, model, and license plate for it. He passed my note and keys to Amos without saying anything. Next, we packed everything up and set off again. Kurt pulled into a grocery store so I could grab some snacks for the hangar. When we returned to the hangar, Kurt hopped out of the truck with me. Just a couple more things. The colonel won't put up with any drama in the unit. You're off limits to the guys, and they're off limits to you, even after your divorce is final. Not really at the top of my list. I know it's not like that now. Things can shift. But you'll always be my little sister. He smiled, a playful grin on his face. But it would be hilarious to see Hollywood get a frozen trout stuck up his butt. It was a cool black sea bass. Ouch. He flinched. So many more spines and fins. They're way bigger, too. I couldn't help but smile a bit at that. Once they were gone, I headed back to my new room and started to arrange things, curious about what I had gotten myself into. ####. I woke up bright and early the next morning to go for a run on the tarmac and runway. Kurt had been clear about the physical training, and I thought the colonel and the sergeant major were pretty tough guys. When I wrapped up and walked over to the hangar, I spotted my car parked outside with the windows down and the keys sitting on the seat. Rob's keys were there as well. I couldn't help but grin, imagining Rob standing right in front of Amos, or more like staring at his huge chest. He got what he deserved. When Kurt brought his team to deliver the equipment, they were super efficient, and it was clear that the Colonel's warning had reached everyone. I might not be Miss America, but I often catch a few guys looking my way, and Kurt's team was like a huge wave of guys everywhere. The forklift got way more attention than I did. The next few weeks were a crazy ride as I got used to my new job, with hardly any time to think about anything else. Operations kicked off right away, with 3 Air Force combat controllers managing the flights in and out. They zoomed in on cool black dirt bikes to get everything set up without a word of hesitation. I was in charge of handling cargo and passengers, mostly in the Pacific area. I felt like there were other secret teams probably working in Europe and Africa, but nobody bothered to fill me in on the details. Many of my smaller shipments came with contact on receipt instructions for the carriers, cargo handlers, and warehouse managers. But the contact info didn't have my name, and I didn't give the final instructions either. It was clear that asking questions wasn't a good idea, especially when Kurt's team suddenly left. I saw that none of the names on the list matched the real people, and the passports weren't American either. Things just got even more confusing from there. I tried to keep my mind busy by working out and enjoying some classic movies. I got really into old black and white movies and kept watching Double Indemnity over and over. Barbara Stanwyck was just amazing in it. One morning, I ran into Hollywood chilling on the hood of a blue SUV right after I finished my run. "Good morning, Wendy. Today is awesome. It's a range day, and range days are always the best." He was bursting with a whole new vibe, leaving behind his usual ladies' man act. He was super excited about going to the firing range. I soon saw that this change wasn't just for my own good. Out on the range, he became a whole new person. I was a bit nervous about joining him. His flirting sometimes seemed like it could lead to trouble if he weren't so incredibly good looking. For weeks, it was just the two of us on that wide open range. I had no idea, but there was really nothing to worry about. Even with his super flirty vibe, he probably wouldn't notice if a Playboy playmate came up to him holding an M40 or M82. I picked up the basics of handling a rifle, but Hollywood jumped in to help me get even better. He was really into firearms, and it showed as he patiently showed me all the basics: how to control my breath, position my cheek, place my fingers, and grip the gun. He called it the grip of no grip. He made it clear that while our muscles might get tired and shaky, our bones stay strong. One day, the sergeant major showed up out of the blue, just when I thought the smell of gunpowder would stick with me forever. We wrapped up shooting and were busy packing everything away. After a quick clean of the rifles, Hollywood chose to take his time for a deep clean. The sergeant major walked over, giving Hollywood a good look. "So," he asked, "she's doing all right. She might not have that special spark to be amazing, but if she packed on another 30 pounds to balance out her slim build, she could be pretty good with another year of practice," Hollywood said, looking at my progress closely. The sergeant major looked my way. "I once knew a woman sniper in Sarajevo. She was pretty good, but when she was 7 months pregnant with her second child, she got even better. She joked that it was like having a built-in sandbag. For a time, she was the nightmare of Sniper Alley, and the Serbs couldn't stand her. They called her Mother Death." He paused for a moment, lost in thought. "I believe she and her husband have a few restaurants now. They have 3 or 4 kids." He blinked. "Anyway, I don't need you to be a sharpshooter. I just want you to be strong. On Monday, you'll start learning about monsters." He spun around and strolled away without saying anything else. Hollywood kept on getting ready to go. What did he mean by monsters? Close combat pros. Handguns, submachine guns, shotguns. That's mostly Kurt. Hollywood sent me to a worn-out building that ended up being a mix of an indoor shooting range and a shoot house. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw that the range was way better than it seemed from the outside. Kurt was standing by a table filled with handguns all lined up neatly. "We're going to dive into the basics of shotguns and handguns. The sergeant major wants to make sure you can protect yourself. I thought the rifle range was a lot of shooting, but Kurt was set on having me try every handgun and shotgun out there until my head was buzzing, even with the Mickey Mouse ears on. After a few weeks, I felt weird if I wasn't holding a handgun. Kurt had me practice my draw for every single handgun run, again and again, until it was super smooth and clean. I used back and belly draws for all my guns, and ankle draws if the gun was small enough to fit that way. That's when the real excitement kicked in. Kurt got the shoot house ready, and I had to walk through it again and again until I could take down every target quickly for him. He even got me to use the team standard weapon until it felt totally natural. The weird metallic cough of the MP5 SD rang in my dreams for weeks. I might have gotten a bit full of myself about my skills, but Kurt showed me something that quickly changed that. Even with a revolver, his shots went off like a machine gun. He always went for it, never needed to focus, and never failed. I can't honestly say I ever saw him draw, even though I was glued to him the whole time. I just looked at him after he shouted clear. He flashed a humble smile. "Hey, no worries. You're doing really well for just starting out, and you'll improve with practice. Some of us just have a different way of processing things, our nerves react quicker, and we notice things around us more easily. That's just how we roll." I shrugged, doing my best to mask my letdown. "So when are you going to get the good guys in the shoot hoe?" "Use?" He gave his head a little shake. "If you find yourself in a tough spot, remember there are no heroes. Just take aim at anything that seems dangerous until you've got no more targets or bullets." He grabbed a locked case from his truck and popped it open. "Check out the gun that Pogo wants you to use." I looked at a strange little revolver that had hardly any barrel at all. "Hey, where's the hammer?" Inside the cover, there's a Smith & Wesson Model 38 Airweight Bodyguard. It's designed for easy carrying, and the hammer is tucked away so it won't snag on your clothes or anything else. It's sturdy and dependable. While it's not great for long-range shooting, the sergeant major and colonel are focused on keeping you safe up close. A bit tiny. It might not seem like it. Snub guns like this are super loud, shoot out big flames, and pack a serious punch. Plus, you're going to use some special ammo that makes it even crazier. It opens up like a flower and causes huge damage. You'll be drawing from your belly, back, and ankle holster. He was spot on. That thing kicked like a mule and roared like a dragon, even though he started me off with lighter loads and gradually built me up. My hands are sore, my wrists are aching, and my shoulders feel heavy. I spent weeks listening to Kurt shout, draw, fire, again and again until it started playing in my dreams. I can't believe I kept waking up ready to grab my gun every time I heard a loud noise outside the hangar. At some point, I stopped paying attention to the jarring kick and the loud bang, and the aches and pains just faded away. Kurt finally said I was trained, but he didn't seem too thrilled about it. After that, I fell into a boring routine for a bit, with one really awkward extra task. I got the role of spouse liaison. My job was to connect with the wives, offer them support when they needed it, and help them with any other challenges they faced. Sadly, they really didn't like me. It sure seemed that way. The unit was tough for the wives, I just didn't have the answers they were looking for. I wasn't able to pitch in with regular admin tasks because I couldn't access main post. Kurt's wife, Katie, was sort of the boss of all the wives since neither the colonel nor the sergeant major were married. I always felt like she was ready to slap me any second if I couldn't answer her questions. It seemed to me that she wasn't a bad person at all, just fed up with nonsense, and all I had to offer was more nonsense. I really didn't like going to the spouse support group meetings. It felt tough to help when I hardly could, and it was annoying to hear them call me the Wendy in that snobby and gross way. The only person who cut me some slack was Amos' wife, Veronica, or Ronnie. She was a pear-shaped blonde with dark brown roots and had a big, bold southern redneck girl vibe that could fill 100 beer commercials. She really didn't care at all what anyone thought of her, except for Amos. They totally loved each other. I spotted them in town at the mall. They were holding hands and enjoying the moment while their 4 kids picked out ice cream. If she wasn't holding his hand, it was on her backside, and if it wasn't, she would reach over and place it there. Sadly, she hardly ever showed up at the spouse support group, so I mostly just saw her at the monthly unit barbecues where everyone except her pretty much overlooked me. I often felt like the little sister just tagging along with the guys, and the wives always made it obvious that I wasn't really part of their group. But not Ronnie. She always took a moment to sit and chat with me. That was really the best part of the barbecues for me. One time, she caught me checking out the wives. "Don't worry about them, Wendy. They don't mean anything by it." She looked at them for a moment, feeling a bit sad. They're all in the same lifeboat, holding on to each other because they don't know what else to do. She tilted her head slightly, looking at them closely, then continued on. "The guys, our guys, we totally get what's happening, maybe even more than anyone wants us to. Especially us. They're the cream of the crop, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. Sometimes there are training accidents and they get hurt, landing in the hospital. Sometimes they don't come back at all. It happens. We act like we don't know, and they act like we can't see their medal racks and count the Purple Hearts." She paused. But the other wives missed the mark. They let their fear take control and took away their time with their guy. She suddenly turned her attention to me. "You can't let that happen. You have to hold on tight, enjoy every moment. Do whatever it takes. Be who you're meant to be." A bright smile spread across her face. Her voice changed in a strange way, from the crackling of backyard bonfires and beer to the vibe of cash, magnolias, and fancy parties. "Maybe you change. Maybe you grew up with all the luxuries and were taught to be a lady, but the only guy for you is a down-to-earth Cajun from the bayou who doesn't belong in your fancy life. Maybe you changed to be part of his." She raised her beer glass to toast me, looking as classy as any duchess, took a light sip, winked at me, and strolled away with smooth charm and style. I was still sitting there, mouth wide open, watching her as she walked up to Amos, gave him a hard slap on the butt, took a big gulp of her beer, and then offered him the rest. ####. I might have kept going like that until I got out if it weren't for Senator Sherling. My divorce was going smoothly, and I had mostly shoved Captain Brandy Sherling's husband-stealing self into a dark corner of my mind. I kept seeing her on TV again and again during the campaign. She couldn't wear her uniform in her daddy's campaign ads, but it was surprising how often Daddy's little angel, with her big silicone breasts and plump lips, found herself doing TV interviews about patriotism, honor, and integrity. She had her arm in a sling the whole campaign season. That was just ridiculous. I did it. I realized it wasn't so bad after all. Her arm was just broken, not completely smashed. Every time she flashed that little self-deprecating smile and talked about her broken arm from training, I could feel steam coming out of my ears. She said, "The harder you sweat in training, the less you bleed in war," and it just got to me. She made me feel like I could throw up. Gross person. It really made me chuckle to see her wince when she plopped her big bottom down on a chair during one interview. She'd keep me in her thoughts for a while. I chose to leave it all in the past. She hung out at the main post, while I chilled at my hangar. After meeting Amos, Rob mostly focused on his work and signed papers whenever they came his way. But the one person who didn't join in was Daddy Sherling. I stopped stressing about him since he showed he wasn't looking for any trouble. He had a race to win, after all. I had just wrapped up checking cargo manifests on a Saturday afternoon when Pogo, dressed casually, showed up with Team 3. "Hurry up, Wendy. It's time to hit the road." The team zipped by me, tossing my things into Pelican cases like it was a race. Where to go? Pogo tossed everything from my nightstand drawer, including my battery-operated boyfriend, into a container without even batting an eye. Where can you keep an eye on the cargo? Outside the United States. Where can you do that? Thailand. Most of our things pass through there. He gave a nod. That sounds good. We have a safe house close to Utapao. He quickly looked back at the container where he tossed my vibrator, then clearly chose to keep quiet about it. We've got to get you out of here. You're heading off to exile on the next thing that catches fire. That sounded really bad. Exile? What did I do wrong? Nothing's changed. Senator Sherling seems to have just realized you're around now that the campaign is done. He's not one to let things slide. The senator told General Faulkner that he wants to get you facing courts-martial charges as soon as he can. Oh no! The phrases dishonorable discharge and sentence to confinement suddenly felt huge in my thoughts. I jumped in to help pack everything into the cases as quickly as I could. Oh man, that's true. That jerk is facing 20 years, and he's on the Armed Services Committee. Colonel Howard told General Faulkner that you're on a secret mission and can't be reached right now, with no end date in sight. He threw me a passport. I had the documents team whip that up for you along with a bunch of other ones. We'll grab the rest for you in Thailand. I was hit by a big wave of despair. I'll be back, no doubt about it. You've got a whole 18 months ahead. We can definitely keep you safe from him during that time. So much can change in 18 months, the senator might find something else to focus on. Just under 40 hours later, I found myself in a go-go bar in the lively red light district of Soi Cowboy in Bangkok, acutely aware of the weight of my .38 tucked in my belly holster. I was grabbing a drink before going back to the hotel, getting ready to head south to Pattaya the next day. At first, we sent most of our cargo to Asia through Utapao, a civil military airport nearby. It usually got loaded onto trucks and taken to Bangkok or other airports, then switched over to smaller civilian planes. Pogo mentioned that the bar was a favorite spot for the pilots and owners of the small cargo carriers we often used. He thought it would be smart for me to see what kind of people we were working with. I thought he was checking to see if I could hold my own. Go-go bars aren't typically spots where single women chill. It was a bit of a whirlwind, though. It felt so strange, I could feel the tiny gun pressing against my stomach with every move I made. I guess I'll have to get the hang of that. Pogo made. It's super clear when he handed me an official Thai military license to carry it. A scruffy guy in a bright red and white aloha shirt, missing a couple of buttons, sat on the next stool over, wearing a slightly faded blue t-shirt underneath. A crumpled, once white straw trilby hat with a tattered brim rested on the bar beside him. He probably shaved a few days ago and looked a bit soft, like the Bangkok heat had slightly melted him around the edges. I got a fuzzy feeling about a well-loved teddy bear. He took a quick look at me, but it was nothing serious. New here? I bet someone with more experience could guess where he was from in Australia, but I couldn't. His accent had clearly changed after spending years away from Australia. It's my first time. My boss thought it would be fun for me to come by here. Your boss is a quirky guy. This is the pilot's bar. The tourist bars are over there, he said, pointing up the street, and the military bars are that way, he added, gesturing in the opposite direction. I handle cargo, so I think I'm in the right spot. I had to come out here to take care of things up close. He nodded with a smile. Got it. I'm Chip Woodley. My real name is Mel, but no one calls me that. Well, except for my mom. Wendy. He leaned over and shook my hand with a serious look, then ordered a couple more drinks. I was a bit surprised to see that he just wanted a Coca-Cola. I'm flying tomorrow. Woodley Air. I usually bring some meds with me, and I've got a crate of my own, an old and 24. I smiled, but it felt really fake. In just under 6 hours in the country, I found myself having drinks with a drug runner. I realized that, somehow, I had actually gotten worse at choosing guys. He saw my silence as a sign to keep chatting. At least it's fun here. Look at Jack over there. He pointed to a tall, handsome guy down the bar. Flies a squirrel helicopter for Lau Green Mountain Development. He's a good guy, but a little sneaky, so keep an eye on your things. He looked around and then pointed to a central table where two tall, slim Asian guys in sharp suits were sitting with a handful of mostly undressed women. The chopsticks over there who have decided to join us are David and Jonathan Huang. They don't come around often, just about every 6 months, and when they do, they spend a ton of cash. Both of them can be quite the troublemakers. They're Hong Kong Chinese twins, and they're said to be the illegitimate sons of a British duke or earl or something. It's best to keep your distance from them, they're a wicked duo. Budgies. They're smugglers. We've got a few of them hanging around here. Jack and I like to call them budgies, it's our little inside joke. Back in Oz, we refer to men's Speedos as swim trunks budgie smugglers because it looks like. He paused, feeling a bit shy and embarrassed. I got it. I struggled to hold back a big smile. Maybe it was my rum and coke, but his blush was pretty adorable. He stumbled for a moment before finding his groove again. They're not great people, those two. They're like the kings and queens of the secret transport game. He grinned. They believe no one can tell them apart, but David has a scar under his left eye from a cut he got in a car accident a few years back in Malaysia. The women are there for Jonathan, while David is into Cat Hoey. Cat what? Cat Hoey. Ladyboys. They're the more beautiful ones. I couldn't take my eyes off it. Honestly, I had no idea. Wow. He burst out laughing. It's a bit of a thing here. The word cat hoey can be seen as rude, so they often call themselves fooeying, but most people use cat hoey. The surgeons do a great job with the TI, breasts. He turned red again, it was just adorably awkward. I watched the brothers carefully. We sent a bunch of shipments all around Asia with a company called Huang Brothers, and it cost us quite a bit. Smugglers? He just shrugged his shoulders. Yes. They run an air freight business and know people at every customs house in Asia. I heard them mention they pay their cousins around 2,500 Hong Kong dollars for each shipment to get through customs, and then they charge their customers about 4 times that amount. That definitely cleared up some extra charges I had noticed. He chatted with other folks at the bar, pilots, business owners, and a few aimless characters. We chatted for nearly 2 more hours, munching on skewers of grilled chicken with super yummy peanut sauce. I really hoped it was chicken. It was fun anyway. I found out so much more about what was really happening with my cargo than I ever imagined. Most of my contact on receipt shipments were handled by some pretty mysterious folks. Fighters, traitors, and even more troublemakers. Their delivery spots were a bunch of every shaky place in the area. I kind of saw it coming, but I was working without a clue. He finally asked me where I would be working. My company keeps a hotel suite here since we have folks coming and going all the time, but it turns out I have an office between Pattaya and Utapao, so I'm heading down to Pattaya tomorrow. He seemed a bit confused, but just shrugged it off. Pattaya feels like a wild zoo. He looked around. It's a bit like this. If you're in town for a few hours, check out Weandy's at the bottom of Soi 2, right by the beach road. His wife cooks amazing food. I found myself going back to my hotel a bit later than I thought I would, and I surprised myself when I told Chip it was great to meet him and that I had a blast. Surprised because I really meant it. If he had been doing something else, I would have tried to keep in touch with him in some way. A girl needs to have some standards, and avoiding dating drug smugglers is definitely a smart move. He really spoke the truth about Weandy's missus and her cooking, that's for sure. Hashtag. Pogo and Howard made their way through the safe house 3 weeks later. Before they arrived, I was the only one hanging out in the safe house, but there were a few local guards and a driver always ready to help out. I took care of some shipments, using the gear at home. I picked up a ton of new things. I went to the Utapao airfield and saw our shipments getting repalleted and relabeled. Nothing stuck around in Thailand. I enjoyed a few fun evenings in Pattaya to break free from the safe house. I picked up some Thai words, especially names of yummy food. I really wish I hadn't found out that the craziness of the go-go clubs on the first floor is nothing compared to the wildness on the upper floors. After exploring upstairs at the Marilyn Go-Go, I mostly hung out at restaurants and grabbed a beer now and then. I also spent a lot of time rethinking how anatomy and physics worked and trying to figure out how to clean my brain with bleach and steel wool. I was thinking about what I learned from Chip, so when Howard and Pogo showed up, I just sat down and mentioned it. When will I finally get to do my job for real? Neither guy seemed all that shocked by it. Howard stared at me with his sharp, icy eyes. Tell me more. If you're going to do it, go all in. I've been handling the basics. Getting the shipments to where they really take off. We're moving way more than just small team stuff, and I knew that. Someone else is in charge of the last part of the shipments. It's super slow and not being run well. We're wasting time and money, and probably losing shipments too. I can sort that out. Pogo looked over at Howard. I knew she'd crack it. Just a bit faster than I thought. Then looking at me again. Are you really sure you want to be part of this? I'm already on it. I signed those manifests behind the scenes. If anything goes wrong, my name's already there. Howard gave a slow nod. The military gear in Connexes is mainly ours, and it's all for specific missions. When the operation is fully approved and out in the open, we use the Mill-Air. When it's not. He shrugged. We use small carriers with fake identities. It doesn't happen all the time. But since we already move things secretly, other agencies ask us to help move cargo and keep it safe if needed. CIA? Sometimes we work with other organizations. There are actually more out there than you might realize. Most of them focus on specific tasks and don't have our skills. It helps us cover costs, and we get plenty of good things back in return. I'm not really sure how to put this, but I doubt there's a book or anything like that. Sounds a bit silly. But do we have a list or something for the smugglers and mercenary pilots? The two looked at each other. Pogo flashed a big grin like a happy crocodile, and then Howard made a funny face. Just hand her the book, Pogo. The book Pogo gave me might sound silly, but it was actually just one piece of a 3-part code. Each piece was totally useless on its own without the other two. We had a cool program that let us plan flights, cargo, and passengers like the schedules were coming straight from the Royal Thai National Intelligence Agency. I wasn't sure if it was a hacking program or some sort of deal with the Thai government. I absolutely did not want to find out. All I heard from Howard was to clean it up however you can and to make sure I don't mess it up. It was obvious that Howard was ready to let me jump into any tasks I wanted to tackle. Once they were gone, I held the keys to everything. I knew what was being sent, who was sending it, and where it was going. The more I learned, the more I saw how important it really was. So many secrets, it's like a treasure chest of mysteries. I recalled an old saying about secrets: they might take you out for knowing that. These secrets were so important that I knew Howard and Pogo would definitely act if they thought I was a threat. Whenever a team came by, the safe house came alive with excitement. The guys were awesome to hang out with. I really liked Kurt's team the most, But they were all fantastic. It felt like having a bunch of big brothers around the house. The single guys, just like in the movies, had a blast in Pattaya, hanging out in hotels with bar girls they'd bar find. The married guys, like Kurt and Amos, stuck to Howard's rules without fail. Kurt and Amos burst out laughing when I joked that the married guys hardly ever went to Pattaya and never spent the night there. Amos laughed with a deep sound that I could feel in my boots instead of just hearing it. Ronnie would totally go wild like it's a Jerry Springer show if I ever messed with any of that. And then there's Needles. Kurt flashed a sly smile. Even if the colonel wasn't tough about it, it just isn't worth it. Hollywood can try to make it fancy, but the risk isn't worth it. We had an awesome medic, Needles. He left right before you joined us. The colonel brought him in from a Special Forces Alpha team. His wife divorced him and ran off with a lawyer she had been seeing for years while he was away. He had no clue anything was wrong. She took the kids and turned their heads against him so they wouldn't even talk to him anymore. Needles really struggled after that. He mostly kept to himself out here, but one night he went into Pattaya all alone, just to grab a drink. He took a sip of his beer. Amos jumped right into the story. The next morning, I hopped in the car with the driver to check out any new beers for the house. We made a quick stop at the Twins to grab some of the guys who stayed over. While I was hanging out by the front desk, Needles came out of the elevator with a girl. She was stunning, really something special. Probably the only girl in Thailand with a real nice figure. He paused, looking like he might feel a bit awkward about that, but wasn't quite sure why. That made me smile. They were just treating me like one of the crew. So, Needles looks super embarrassed, and he's got this weird grin on his face. She's all bouncy like a puppy. When he spots me, he starts to back away from her. But she grabs him, plants a big kiss on him, and then skips out the door. After that, he just wandered around like a zombie for weeks. Kurt shut his eyes and gave his head a little shake. We spent a whole month getting the story from him. It was such a slow night. Needles was basically the only guy in the bar, and Retana, that's the girl's name, was super bored. She spotted him sulking in the corner and decided to chat with him. Even with her not-so-great English, she managed to get the whole scoop on his divorce. She even paid her own bar fine and took him to the hotel. She was determined to make him smile, no matter how long it took. The next morning, she finally asked what he did for a living, and he said he was a paramedic. She asks him, "What's that?" So Needles says to her, "It's a bit like a doctor." She squealed and stretched out her arms to him. "Oh, can you check me for AIDS?" At that moment, Kurt and Amos started giggling, but it grew fast until they were bursting with laughter. I was shocked. Did she have AIDS? Kurt shook his head. We found Retana, and she was doing great. She was really a great kid. I ended up marrying a top Thai foreign service officer. I believe he's an ambassador now. But Needles was almost like a recluse after that. What happened to him? His divorce really messed him up more than anyone realized. He got really into Valium and Oxy, and in the end, he got caught. The colonel let him go, misplaced the paperwork and accidentally messed up the evidence chain. Needles had always been a great teammate, so the colonel made sure to take care of him. He had to go into a rehab program first, though. The teams didn't come by often enough, so I ended up watching a bunch of old movies they brought me. I made regular trips to Bangkok twice a week to handle our shipments and swing by Soy Cowboy. I often bumped into Chip and got the latest scoop on business gossip. I told myself it was okay to hang out with a drug smuggler because he was my source. It turned into a regular thing. Chip was like a breath of fresh air amidst all the muscle and manliness that filled the safe house. I enjoyed having the teams around, but the non-stop testosterone was a bit much. The bills for steak and beer when they visited were huge. Chip's laid-back vibe was super calming. I learned he used to be a flight lieutenant in the Australian Air Force before he used his inheritance to get his in 24. He wasn't weak, he was just way more down-to-earth than my guys. I began picking up on the chatter to figure out what was really happening. I reached out for a favor from one of the 3-letter agencies and got the travel plans of all our key contacts sent to me. The info came through an anonymous daily email on the one super secure computer in the house. I began keeping a closer eye on our shipments and was able to sort out many little mistakes in our system. I spotted a trend with the Huang brothers' shipments. About every 60 days, one would get stuck in customs, making us pay a bunch of extra money and special fees to get it going again. I hadn't noticed it before since I didn't have all the details. I wanted to chat with Howard and Pogo about it, but they didn't swing by before the next hang-up in Macau took place. My morning email revealed that the Huang brothers were also in Macau. I thought twice, but then I recalled Howard's words, by any means necessary. I shot off a note with my plans, grabbed a pile of travel cash from the safe. Feeling a mix of excitement and nerves, I took 5 gold Krugerrands from the Don't Touch This emergency stash. I hopped on the next flight to Macau. I had heard some buzz in Bangkok about the 8 Golden Lotus, a nightclub owned by the Huang brothers. I thought, why not kick things off there? It was an early morning flight, so I took it easy at the hotel for most of the day, trying to reassure myself that I was making the right choice. Wendy O'Connell, sergeant in the U.S. Army and a cargo handler, was getting ready to confront a couple of international smugglers who, by all the buzz, were known as murderous bastards. I kept delaying my trip to the club, convincing myself I should wait until I knew they were there. Finally, I had to decide whether to go now or wait until tomorrow, but then I wouldn't know if they'd be there since I couldn't check my secure email. I finally slipped into the simple black skirt suit I had made on a whim in Bangkok, grabbed my stylish fake Hermes crocodile bag filled with my little stash of gold coins, and called the front desk for a limo to the club. I paused for a moment, but then tucked my noisy little gun in its pancake holster at the small of my back. I definitely didn't plan on shooting the Huang brothers in their own club, but I felt a bit off without my gun now. As soon as we got to the club, I hopped out of the limo and told the driver to hang tight. I was sure I'd be back in a flash, or maybe not at all. When I thought of the Huang brothers, I pictured them in fancy silk suits and pricey Italian shoes. But the 8 Golden Lotus was totally the opposite. It would have looked loud and over the top even in Las Vegas. It stretched across half a city block and was packed with bright pink neon lights and shiny gold leaf, way more than I ever imagined could fit in one place. I stopped at the bottom of the wide staircase before going up, trying to think of Rita Hayworth and the lady from Shanghai and Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity. Then I clenched my jaw and made my way up the stairs. The club was buzzing with flashing lights, and a bunch of super chill Chinese Robert Palmer girls were on the main stage, jamming to Addicted to Love. They were supporting a guy who was nailing the performance, even with a bit of a Russian twist to his voice. From all the stories and chatter I'd heard in Bangkok, I knew the brothers had a raised room at the back of the club, so I started pushing through the huge crowd to get there. I spotted the room with its double doors wide open, letting the brothers gaze down at their little kingdom. Then I saw something really unsettling. Pogo had shown up on my right side without saying a word or making eye contact, but he was keeping right in step with me. He must have seen my note. I couldn't help but wonder if he was hoping I'd do well or mess up. I spotted Kurt coming up next to me. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I really didn't want him to see me mess up. I finally found the brothers' table and saw a guy who had been sitting across from them get up and leave his empty chair behind. Great timing. I bounded up the steps and gave their personal waitress a light tap on the shoulder. "A Cuba Libre, please." Then I plopped down in the chair. The little scar under David's eye stood out in the light. "Jonathan." "David." I gave a little nod to each one with a smile that felt a bit fake. They were totally surprised and had no clue who I was. I took a moment to look at my nails, kind of tuning out the brothers for a bit. It felt like something Barbara Stanwyck would do. "I'm really sorry. It feels like we've been working together forever, and we really get each other." "Hey there. I'm Wendy." I noticed a look of confusion instead of understanding. "Of course." David's mouth moved a little, but no words came out. "You're keeping one of my employer's shipments locked up here in Macau, just like you've done before. They don't think it's funny anymore. It would be awesome for everyone if it came out right away." Jonathan's face lit up with anger, and he began to turn to one of his bodyguards, ready to snap something. Sensing this, the bodyguard quickly reached into his jacket. Everyone suddenly stopped in their tracks. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The bodyguard was trying hard not to blink, with Pogo's gun pressed right against his ear. Kurt had a gun in each hand, one aimed at Vid's head and the other at Jonathan's. Pogo and Kurt looked as serious as can be, like they were made of stone. They moved so fast it was like they were a blur. Even though I had seen Kurt and the other team monsters at the range, it was hard to believe. I couldn't imagine how wild it must have looked to everyone else. My heart was racing, but I made myself chill out. What would Barbara Stanwyck do? I opened my purse, took out my compact, and checked my makeup in the mirror, acting like I was fixing the lipstick on the edge of my lip. "Wow! This is so exciting." I said it like a fact, not a question, while trying to sound cool and uninterested. I shut the compact and tossed it into my purse. Too much excitement isn't good for business. But it's super fun. I waved my hand a little, brushing it off. Kurt and Pogo made their weapons vanish. But the danger was still there, especially since everyone realized that the Huang's bodyguards were totally outmatched. Just a moment later, as everyone settled down, the waitress came back with my drink, totally unaware as she set it down in front of me. I took a nice, slow sip. "Awesome." I casually tossed one of the gold Krugerrands onto her tray. Jonathan was the first to crack. "Who are you and who do you work for?" "Hi, I'm Wendy." I always make sure to do what it takes to keep my employers smiling. "Jonathan, about your second question, smart people don't ask questions unless they truly want to know the answer." He gave in. "What do you want?" "It's not about what I desire. It's all about what my bosses want. They want their shipments to go smoothly. Your cousin can totally handle that for his usual fee." They both nodded. Nice and slow. I flashed them a pretend warm smile. Look. We're buddies now. Like family. A small gesture from you would be great. How about a family discount? How about 10%? I had another sip of my drink. They both nodded again, looking a bit dazed. I couldn't help but smile a little. So it's settled. Enough with the games. My bosses don't have much patience at all. I raised an eyebrow and looked around. I really don't want to lose a place that knows how to make a good Cuba Libre. I tilted my head slightly, gave a quick nod, then stood up and confidently walked out of the 8 Golden Lotus. I didn't glance back, even though I could sense everyone watching me. I believed in Pogo and Kurt to help me escape safely. The limo was all set, but the driver was missing. Pogo kindly opened the back door for me while Kurt hopped around and jumped into the driver's seat. Pogo plopped down in the seat across from me. As Kurt drove off, I braced myself for Pogo to chew me out for my bold move. But instead, a big grin lit up his face like a jester's. That was awesome. Where on earth did you get that idea? I nearly let out a sigh of relief. Classic detective films. I get it, it might sound a bit corny. But it totally worked. And it totally worked. I never even considered it. Don't hide away, just be something that doesn't catch anyone's eye. Right now, they're trying to find out if you're with the Triads, the Russian Mafia, the Chechens, the Yakuza or... He stopped for a moment. I jumped in. Or someone even worse. He laughed. Or someone even worse. Join us. Your note mentioned that there are other groups that need some fixing up? Kuala Lumpur, Taipei, Jakarta, Kabukicho, Vladivostok, and a few others. I believe the Wendy should say hi to the community. In the months that followed, we hit the road, planning our visits for the best effect. I mostly zipped in and out of Bangkok, dropping by to see Chip whenever I could. He was as dependable as a clock. That felt a bit strange to me. A drug smuggler with a regular routine. Pogo and Howard switched up my bodyguards to make it seem like I had a big team behind me. Howard even joined me on a few of my friendship visits. He laughed all the way to the airport, saying I had a knack for being dramatic that was just right. He even pushed me to use some funds to grab a whole bunch of black skirt suits in silk, fine wool, and cashmere, with matching shoes, plus a couple of real Hermes alligator bags. He didn't want me to be stuck with a cheap knockoff. I thought it was just a little sacrifice I had to make for my country. The rumors zipped through the underworld like a fire. In Kabukicho, the bustling red light district in Tokyo, a sumo doorman got yanked down the street by his hair like a little kid. Amos thought the doorman didn't show enough respect when I showed up, or at least he pretended to think so. I just brushed it off, acting like it didn't matter. When I finally got to Russia and walked into Club Troika in Vlad, a wide-eyed, scared white-blonde waitress was already there with my Cuba Libre, sent over as soon as I was spotted. Let's just say the talks went super smoothly. That's how I came back as the Wendy once more. This time, the name brought on fear and respect instead of scorn. I couldn't help but love it, the excitement, the wild reputation, and especially the respect from the guys in the unit. I wasn't just the little sister anymore, I was one of them. Maybe I wasn't a sharpshooter like they were, but I was still one of the crew. I ran into one surprising downside I didn't see coming. After a few months, I swung by the bar to say hi to Chip, but I just saw his crumpled hat as he hurried out the back door. At first, I thought it was just a strange coincidence, but it happened 2 more times, and I figured out he was dodging me. I had a bad feeling I knew what was up. Chip was too plugged into the gossip to ignore it for long, but it took me a few weeks back at the safe house and a gut punch to figure out my next move. No one was around, so I was all alone when a fancy envelope showed up in the dispatch bag just for me. It was my final divorce papers. Honestly, it didn't feel like much. I hadn't seen Rob since the day I caught him with Captain Silicone. I'd heard he got moved to Fort Benning, maybe thanks to Daddy Sherling trying to keep everything hush-hush. But still, it stung a lot, like I was the one who messed up. In a different situation, I might have let it all out on a friend's shoulder. If Kurt's crew was around, they would have filled me up with rum and coke until I was dizzy, then had Amos and me belting out the team version of Family Tradition on the karaoke machine. All 20 verses, even the 3 original ones. That's exactly what they did when I was feeling down about being stuck alone in the safe house over Christmas. And you know what? It really helped. But they weren't around, and I didn't have any girlfriends to hang out with. So, I told myself I had to go check on some cargo in Bangkok. Forget the fact that there really wasn't anything important to look at coming down the chute. I didn't even bother to trick myself very well. I arrived at the bar early, sporting a sundress for a change, and snagged a cozy table in the corner to keep an eye out for my target. But it didn't take long, just about 5 minutes, before Jack strolled over. I bet it was the dress that really grabbed his eye. "So, you're friends with Chip, huh?" I nodded. "Do you know where he is? Is he around?" "He's around here somewhere, probably will show up a bit later." Jack pulled out the other chair and sat down. "I'll hang out with you until he arrives." Jack spent the next 20 minutes sharing tales about his adventures in Asia, trying to make himself sound tough and heroic. Maybe, before I started hanging out with the guys on the teams, I would have found it more impressive. But honestly, he just didn't have that cool vibe, and he really didn't compare to the guys on the teams. He kept talking until I totally zoned out. Chip walked in and was heading our way. He couldn't see me in the dark, and he was really into chatting with Jack. That was until he got to the table and noticed me sitting there. I was about to grab his arm, but he jumped back fast, like he spotted something shocking on the ground. He glanced at Jack, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "You're messing with fire there, buddy." Jack raised his hand. "I wasn't trying to get close to her, Chip. Just hanging out with her." Complete nonsense, obviously. Guys like Jack were always on the hunt and too self-absorbed to worry about hurting a friend. If they even had any friends at all. Chip shot a glance at me and then back at Jack, his eyes blazing with anger. "That's not what I meant, Jack. That's the Wendy we've all been talking about," he exclaimed a bit too loudly, and everyone turned to stare. "Whoa!" Jack's chair clattered to the floor as he jumped up, raising his hand in surprise. "I had no idea." Chip twirled around and dashed straight for the back door. Not paying any attention to Jack's stammered sorries, I took off after Chip. The buzz about Wendy's was on my side. Chip had to push through the crowd, but they moved aside for me like magic as whispers of the Wendy spread through the crowd. I could have snatched his shirt before he dashed out the door, but I waited until he was in the alley. I just wanted a little privacy. "Chip." He stopped in his tracks, raised his hand slightly, and then slowly turned to look at me as I loosened my hold. "What do you want?" "Hey Chip, it's me." "I know it's you, I just wasn't sure what you were." It took me some time to figure it out, and then I had to really believe it was you. "Wow, I was busy giving you a heads up about the Huang brothers, but I really should have been giving them a heads up about you." I frowned at him. "What do you think I am?" "Who knows? Why not share it with me? I've heard some wild stories that you're hanging out with the Triads, the Russians, or even that you're an Irish provo wanted for a bunch of things, doing mercenary work for somebody. I heard some buzz that you're the daughter of an American mafia boss. Evrio. Any knows you're linked to some serious trouble." He glanced around the alley. "And those bodyguards of yours just pop up out of thin air. They aren't around." "I'm not on the job, Chip. It's been a rough week, and I'm just looking to chill out." I glanced at the club door inside. "But that's not happening tonight." He flashed a quick smile that vanished just as fast. "I'm not saying sorry. I really dislike being taken advantage of." I nearly said no to using him, but then I stopped myself. "I understand that. I didn't expect to actually like you." My honesty caught him off guard. "I don't want to be involved in this, I keep away from the trouble. That's how folks get hurt." I looked at him and said, "Chip, you're into drug smuggling." "Hey, Wendy. It's all about the pharmaceuticals. I give expired medications to those who need them and can't get anything else. They still work." The big drug companies put expiration dates on a bunch of things just to stop people from hoarding them. What I'm doing might not be totally legal, but it's not heroin. Wow, that really surprised me. You can actually make money doing that? His mouth curled up. Not a lot, but it gets by. Seriously? Getting medicine to folks who can't pay for better options doesn't really seem like a money-making plan. That sounds like a challenging business plan. He began to argue but then slouched a little. Yeah. It's quite tough. I'm just getting by. If something really bad happens with the plane, that's it. But no one else is interested in the cargo or the route, so I probably won't get into big trouble for it, and it's still a good thing to do. Sorry for getting mixed up about what you do. I pointed down the alley to the bright neon lights of the main street. Everything around us kind of suggests something else. This isn't a street named after Mother Teresa. Some of the girls at the Lucky 7 totally dress up like nuns on Saturdays. He flashed a crooked half smile. You make it all sound so shady. I just couldn't help but laugh. It really is sleazy, Chip. Super sleazy. He threw his hands up. That's such a downer. That's true, but it's a bit of a downer. Hey, it seems like a drink would really hit the spot. He looked at the door. Not in there. You know, that's sort of on you. I need to find a new spot to chill now. Looks like I need to check out a spot in Patpong or Nana Plaza. I bet everyone is talking about it now. He shrugged, looking a bit shy. Why would I want to drink with you, anyway? You're my buddy. He began to protest, but then he paused. He couldn't argue that we were friends. I took his hand and pulled him down the alley. There's a bar in the Imperial. What about the Bangkok Imperial? I gave a nod. You can't get in there unless you're with someone who's already inside. Even if they did let us in, I couldn't pay for a glass of water there. When I stayed quiet and just raised an eyebrow, his voice faded and he shut his eyes. Damn. That's where you're gonna stay, right? Being a femme fatale has its fun advantages. The doorman shot him a skeptical glance. The Imperial was so fancy that even the hookers had to look sharp and act right. We barely settled at the bar when one of the staff handed Chip a fancy burgundy jacket and took his hat and aloha shirt away. After a couple of drinks, Chip noticed I was still the same Wendy he remembered, and he started to chill out a little, but he was still a bit worried. Hey Wendy, just how much trouble am I in? Nothing at all. Not with me, for sure. The rest is just business. What's the business about? Just moving stuff to where it needs to be. I noticed a spark of curiosity in his eyes. That's it, Chip. You really don't want to know more. He did, but he had been around the smuggling scene long enough to recognize a real warning when he heard one. He quickly switched topics. Do you think any of these folks know where my hat and shirt disappeared to? I really don't want to lose it. I poked his ribs. With the staff around here, they probably took them to give them a nice burial. That would shrink your wardrobe by half. I'd be upset about that if it wasn't true. I called the bartender over. He had that cool, relaxed vibe you only find in the best hotel workers. Yes, madam? Where did Mr. Woodley's overshirt and hat go? He kept right on going without skipping a beat or changing his face at all. They've been, well taken care of, and brought right to your room, of course. Thanks. The bartender strolled away as I fought hard to hold back my laughter. I glanced at Chip, doing my best to hold it together. He thinks you're a. The look on his face was priceless. I bent over, trying not to tumble off the stool, laughing like crazy. Chip Woodley, international gigolo. Luckily, Chip joined in on the laughter with me. He thinks you're giving me money so you can take me to your hotel room and do whatever you want with me? Hold on, that means I'm Julia Roberts. I almost toppled off my stool right then, but Chip's hand saved me. It was super late, and we were the last ones at the bar, yet the staff still shot me looks of disapproval for my wild behavior without saying a word. He helped me stand up again. Maybe we should leave this place. I'm not sure I want to find out what would happen if they try to kick you out. If even half of the rumors are right, your huge bodyguards will show up in a flash and take out everyone. I couldn't help but giggle, and it just wasn't working out. Only one of them is really a giant. And they come in without making a sound. I got up and took his hand. Come on, let's go find your shirt. And a hat. I'm not going anywhere without my hat. We walked across the soft, fluffy carpet in the pretty pink marble halls until we reached the waiting elevator. I pressed the button for the top floor. Chip shook his head. The penthouse? Absolutely. Benefits, Chip, benefits. He definitely didn't have a shot at leaving the suite that night. The hotel staff clearly knew what was up even before I realized it myself. Hashtag. The next morning, we were at the cozy breakfast table, sipping coffee and enjoying our meal, wrapped up in super thick and fluffy robes that felt like a warm hug. I wasn't even sure if they were allowed in most places. Chip took a sip of the amazing coffee that room service brought. I didn't see that coming. He grinned, a genuine grin. But I'm glad it did. Me too. But you might end up wishing you hadn't. Not only do you have to do the walk of shame out of the hotel, but it looks like the staff messed up your outfit. I said, pointing at the fresh and neat Aloha shirt. They even replaced all the buttons. Chip shook his head sadly. So embarrassing. They don't care about tradition at all. Oh, my poor hat. It sat on the shelf above the shirt, so bright and clean it almost hurt your eyes. Even the worn edges looked like they had been fixed up just right. I grinned. I just couldn't stop. I had been beaming all morning. I've got one more night in Bangkok. How about I take you out for dinner? He glanced around the fancy room. Maybe somewhere that's a little more affordable. Have you ever tried the Royal Dragon? Is that the place where the waiters zoom around on roller skates? It's said to be the biggest restaurant in the world. I haven't gone there yet. That evening, I found myself in a huge restaurant buzzing with activity, munching on all sorts of weird seafood, sporting Chip's hat and an Aloha shirt. I didn't have to pull him back to my hotel, it felt more like a fun race. That turned into our special routine whenever we were both around. Dinner at the Royal Dragon, then breakfast in my room at the Imperial. I couldn't hit up the bars or go-go clubs on Soy Cowboy anymore, so we made our plans a bit more official. I figured the only issues were how soon my end-term service was coming up and how much Daddy Sherling was still after me. But I totally overlooked the real threat. Hashtag. Chip was spot on. Being stuck in the middle is risky. I was just a month away from leaving the army, and I started to get really anxious about what to do next when I heard a report from the Bangkok police. An Australian guy in a bright red flowered shirt and a white hat had been pulled out of a bar on Soy Cowboy by some Chinese gunman the night before. I quickly opened the morning email that showed me where all the smugglers were. The Huang brothers were in Macau, and one of their planes had just taken off from Bangkok a few minutes ago, making a quick stop on the way. I got really lucky. A Thai military flight to Macau was taking off from Utapao in just 2 hours, and it was going straight there, unlike the Huang brothers' plane. It would land less than 30 minutes after theirs. I might actually make it. I used our program to add myself to the manifest as VIP cargo. Kurt's team was in, but no one could stop me as I dashed out the door of the safe house. I snatched my gun, some cash, and a pile of Krugerrands. The flight to Macau was something else. The Thai flight crew was super professional and seemed totally unfazed by why a foreigner like me was on board under National Intelligence Authority. Smart guys. They probably picked up on my frustration and barely hidden panic, even though I was doing my best to keep my femme fatale vibe going. I paused on my way out of the airport to call back to the safe house. I thought Kurt would pick up, but instead, the line clicked over to Pogo. I'm in Macau. We got that sorted out. Kurt found the reports just after you walked out the door. His voice was sharp. Maybe mad. The thought of Pogo or Howard being really mad was super scary. I messed up, I let my guard down. I'm the reason he's in trouble. I have no choice. We've all got choices, Wendy. It's not just about making choices, it's really about what happens next. Everything has its effects. Is that friend really worth all that trouble? I paused for a moment, wanting to say something, anything at all, but honestly, there was nothing to say. I'm sorry. I ended the call. A fancy airport limo whisked me straight to the Huang Brothers Club. All the tales and whispers I'd heard pointed to just one spot where the Huang brothers hung out. The 8 Golden Lotus looked pretty gloomy and worn out in the daylight, and a bit of trash by the curb seemed to fit right in. The doorman's eyes went big as I walked up the steps. He glanced at me, then down at some blood on the doorsill. When you're out of choices, just bluff. I looked him right in the eye and said, run. I could still hear Ronnie's words echoing in my head about becoming who you need to be. Maybe I wasn't just pretending after all. He was quick to act. I swung open the door and stepped into the mostly empty club. A few workers were buzzing around, cleaning the bar and shining the tables, not really noticing me. I made my way to the back room. Just as I was almost there, everything went wild. One of the bartenders spotted me and started shouting into the phone, while the girls dashed for the door, clearly in a bit of a panic. I spotted a bartender pulling out a shotgun just as I squeezed through the door of Huang's private room. My stomach flipped when I spotted the familiar red and white shirt on the person slumped in the chair by the table. One hand was pinned flat on a cutting board, and 2 fingers were resting in the middle of the table. There was a big pool of blood, and part of my mind tried to pull me away by wondering if they were just going to swap out the table or if they had a way to clean it all up. Jonathan loomed over him, holding down the arm with one hand and gripping a bloody cleaver in the other. David had been trying to rouse the poor guy. Both of them looked at me in disbelief. It got even better when I started laughing. You picked the wrong guy. Jack's eyes were all puffy, and his nose looked really messed up. But it was totally Jack, not Chip. I felt a huge wave of relief wash over me. Jonathan lifted the cleaver slightly. If you budge, he's a goner. Oh, Jonathan, I truly believe you picked the wrong guy. This one doesn't belong to me. Sure, go for it and do your thing. A buzzing sound kicked in behind me, and David flashed a creepy, sneering grin as the buzzing suddenly stopped. Our guys are here. And if he's not the right guy, maybe we should chat about. I glanced at him, weighing my choices. I could grab Jack and head out, but that wouldn't fix anything. It doesn't matter, David. You might have grabbed the wrong guy, but you were really after my guy. It seemed like Jonathan got it first, but that was okay. In my mind, I could hear Kurt shouting draw, and my instincts took over. The tiny revolver was just inches from Jonathan's chin when it fired, making his head snap back. David was lunging for me, fumbling for something under his coat, but it didn't matter. The table blocked him, and my gun fired again, cutting him off as he tried to yell something. I whirled around and locked the door in a flash. Jack cracked one eye open a bit, the loud bang of the pistol finally waking him up. Are you here to save me? Absolutely not. I came here to save Chip. His voice was all jumbled. Dumb joke. I told Chip that if he could score someone like you, I'd give it a shot too. He took off with his hat and shirt. That's a funny joke. He chuckled softly as I grabbed the cleaver to slice through the blood-stained leather straps on the cutting board. He got himself sitting up and bunched the shirt around his hand. I shot him a frosty look. You're covering the cost to get that shirt cleaned. I really like that shirt. He stared at me, totally shocked, then gave a slow nod. So, what's next? I stopped for a moment, deep in thought. I had 3 bullets, and they likely had a whole squad out in the club now. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I just shoved their bodies out the door. Out of nowhere, a burst of gunfire broke out. It started off normal, but then turned into a strange, metallic stutter. It didn't go on for long. All I could hear was my heartbeat and Jack's heavy breathing. Jack took a step ahead, but I held him back. Stay here. He looked at me in disbelief as I slid the revolver back into its holster and carefully opened the door. I burst outside, my heart pounding, hands raised, and opened just a little. Clear. 12 of Kurt's team were spread out all over the club, wide awake and ready for anything. Every way in was watched by at least one pair of eyes. Their weapons were always on the move, looking for targets. I didn't keep track of how many bodies were on the floor, but there sure looked to be a lot of them. A lonely figure in a worn-out flight suit stood there, staring at me with a look that said he needed answers to questions he couldn't even put into words. It made me realize how they had arrived so fast. Chip. I hopped over a body and threw my arms around him. He hugged me tight, then pulled back to look at me. "You've got something on your face," he said, pointing to the side of his cheek. "Oh, that's Jonathan." It could be a bit of David, but mostly Jonathan. He looked a little green but managed to grin. "Feeling a bit possessive, huh? I'm not really into sharing. It's been an issue in the past. I'll keep that in mind." "You should." Kurt suddenly towered over us. "You made a choice here, Wendy." We bent a ton of rules, pulled some strings, and called in favors to get to Chip and make sure we arrived on time. We can say we didn't get what was happening. Howard will totally buy that from us, even if he doesn't really buy into it. No way. Kurt shook his head and glanced at me. "There's a van downstairs, just take it back to the airport. Head out to a place, any place. We'll send the other guy back to Thailand." I squinted at him. "Alive, got it?" "He's a fool, but without him, they might have caught Chip." Kurt grinned and shrugged. "He'll be just fine." Feeling a little rattled. "Just to make sure he stays quiet." "Totally, he could really use that." Chip let out a sigh. "So, where do we head next?" "I've got a few ideas." I headed for the door when a deep voice stopped me. "Don't forget the suitcase, boss lady." Amos winked at me. As we walked out the door, I spotted Hollywood on one knee, peering up and down the street with a scoped rifle that seemed like a tricked-out M25, if I recalled correctly. I noticed 3 bodies lying in the street. He looked up and said, "You're a lucky man, Chip. Look after her." Chip glanced at the sniper rifle and then at the bodies down the street. "I will, buddy." We dashed down the steps to a white van. Chip jumped into the driver's seat while I squeezed in, bumping my foot on a suitcase wedged between the seats. "Drive fast, Chip. We absolutely have to get out of here." "Who are those people, Wendy?" "The triads? Not good at all." "Who are the Russians?" "Not good at all." "Wow. What could be more terrible?" "Chip, trust me, you really don't want to find out. Go faster." I hoisted the suitcase onto my lap. It was super heavy, so I needed both hands. I popped it open and peeked inside. It had to be all the cash from the safe house, plus every single Krugerrand. "Step on it, Chip. Honestly. Let's hit the road. Quicker." ###. Half a year later. Pochentong Airfield, just outside Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I totally missed them coming in because I had all 3 fans blasting. Our office AC was out again, so the fans were a must to keep from melting in the afternoon heat. The sound of the guest chair sliding out in front of my desk was my first clue something was up. "Wow, they really grow up fast, huh, Pogo? They never reach out. They just don't write at all. It's a bummer, isn't it, Colonel?" I slowly lifted my gaze, feeling a heavy knot in my stomach. Howard was sitting in the chair across from me, and Pogo was casually leaning against the doorframe, looking relaxed. Maybe I could talk them into just getting rid of me and letting Chip be. Chip doesn't know a thing. I haven't shared a thing with him. Howard looked at me with his icy blue eyes. "I didn't think you would." "All right, that was a start." I stood tall and asked, "What can C&W shipping do for you?" Pogo laughed and looked right at Howard. "I think you called it chutzpah, didn't you?" Howard nodded, keeping his eyes on me. "That's the only way to put it. It's something you come into the world with. You either got it or you don't. I waited. They might have been playing games with me, but I knew I wouldn't get my revolver out of my desk in time. Pogo was way too quick, and I had a feeling Howard was even faster than me. Howard dropped a folder on my desk. Here are your discharge papers. You've been gone for so long. I opened them up and looked at the papers. Is this for real? Pogo grinned his big grin. You even snagged a meritorious service medal, not bad for a terminal buck sergeant. Of course, no one in the division would put their name on it, but we know people at SOCM. There wasn't much that could be done about getting a good conduct medal, especially with that general letter of reprimand in your file. I grinned. I bet it looked a little wild. I don't mind. That was totally worth giving up a good conduct medal. Your things are in the truck outside, too. Even all your suits and shoes. Pogo said, looking a bit pensive. Wow, that's a ton of shoes. Howard flashed a tight smile. All right, let's get down to business. Business? Let's talk about business. We, along with a few of our. Hey everyone, we've been having some trouble getting our shipments out smoothly lately. Seriously? I fought to keep a straight face. They still relied on me. I was pretty sure he noticed my curiosity, though. Howard nodded wisely. Really? Since the sad passing of the Huang brothers, their group has been fighting among themselves, and that's caused some problems. No one has been able to take it over since all their top guys are long gone. What can I do to help you with that? The Huang brothers' companies have, of course, legally gone to their closest family member. You might be talking to the wrong person. You need to chat with him. Her. Looks like they had a sister. He pushed another folder my way and waited for me to open it. I opened my passport. There it was, Wendy Huang, a British citizen, born in Hong Kong. My own face looked back at me. Pogo gazed up at the ceiling. I studied at Vassar and got my master's in business administration. She's known for being pretty tough. Word on the street is that she took out her brothers right in their own nightclub, and then had her bodyguards take care of all their lieutenants. I don't look like I'm from China. Half Chinese. Do you honestly believe anyone wants to get that up close? I shut my eyes tight for a moment. Well, that would solve the Senator Shirling problem. I can check out the states. Howard flung another folder onto the desk. Oh, I totally forgot about that. The senator is really trying hard to keep his daughter out of any more news stories. Pogo was chuckling softly. I opened the folder and looked at the front page of the Sun newspaper from about a month ago. Teamwork. Senator's kid connects with others. Brandy Shirling was on the front page, her naughty bits blurred out, clearly rocking just thigh-high boots and a strap-on that looked like it could break down doors. A man older than her dad was tied up naked on the bed, head down and butt up. Could that be? Yep, that's Dennis Velman, the Democrat who ran against Senator Shirling in the last election. I chuckled. Looks like he's starting to get used to being let down by the Shirlings. Howard looked at the picture for a while. She's being told to step down from her position for the good of the army. Of course, the senator isn't keen on anything that might bring more attention to his daughter right now. I don't think so. Isn't it funny how the camera seems to add 30 pounds? Isn't that meant to be 10? Maybe she just gained some weight. What happened here? It's quite a tale, but Pogo knows some people. We just hung out for a bit. Howard finally leaned back. So, we're all set? I called on my inner femme fatale. For the right price, of course. Pogo chuckled. That's only fair, but considering you vanished with almost $500,000 in cash, I'd expect you to give us a family deal. Did you say 10%? I just couldn't help but smile that time.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you for your time. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you there.